What do you do when everything you've worked for slips away? Imagine losing the woman you've spent your life with, not because you stopped loving her, but because you couldn't provide the way you once did. After years of hard work, your savings are gone, your job is a memory, and your wife walks out the door, leaving you with nothing but questions. This isn't just a story about money. It's about love, betrayal, and the harsh reality of what happens when you lose it all. Stay tuned, because what happens next will shock you.
Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. We're also on an exciting journey to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. If you enjoy stories that move, inspire, and make you think, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Now let's get back to the story. You won't want to miss what happens next.
It all started with a dream that once seemed so simple, so attainable. I married Carla when I was young. We didn't have much at first, but we had each other. We worked hard, built a life, and over the years, I thought we had it all figured out. I worked long hours in construction, while she took care of the home, raising our kids, making sure everything ran smoothly. Together, we were a team. But as the years went by, things started to change. The world changed. I couldn't keep up with the new demands of the job, and the economy wasn't helping. Slowly, I felt the weight of aging on my shoulders, and my body couldn't handle the long hours anymore. I had to leave my job. They told me it was time to go. Too old, too slow. My body was breaking down, and so was my confidence. At first, Carla understood. She knew I was struggling, and I thought we would face this together. But after a few months of unemployment, I saw the stress creeping into her eyes. The frustration. She would hide it well, but I could feel the tension building between us. The silence in the house became deafening. I stopped hearing her laughter and started hearing her sighs instead. The bills piled up. I did everything I could to find another job. I sent out resumes, attended interviews, but nothing came through. I spent every day applying, hoping for something, anything, to give us a chance. But it was always the same story. We appreciate your experience, but we're looking for someone younger. Or, we need someone with a bit more energy. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own home. I couldn't provide the way I used to. I saw Carla grow more distant, and it hurt me more than I could say. She started working longer hours. I didn't ask much about her job, but I knew something was different. She would come home late, tired, and distant. The warmth we once shared was slipping away. One day, it happened. I came home early, desperate to surprise her with a dinner I made myself. Something special to lift her spirits. I had been cooking all afternoon, hoping that maybe, just maybe, this small gesture would remind her of the good times we had. But when I walked into the kitchen, I froze. Carla was on the phone, speaking softly but urgently. I could hear the tone of the conversation, and it was like a punch to my gut. She was talking to someone, a man. Her voice was warm, inviting, something I hadn't heard in a long time. She laughed. It wasn't a sound I remembered. My heart sank. As I stood there, listening, I felt the walls of the house close in on me. The life we built was crumbling, and it wasn't just about the money. It was about something more, something I couldn't name, but I knew it was gone. The phone call ended, and she turned around, her face frozen in surprise. "You're home early," she said, trying to mask her discomfort with a forced smile. But I could see the truth in her eyes. The distance. The space between us that had been growing for months. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask her who she was talking to. I didn't want to know. I just stood there, watching her, feeling the weight of everything I couldn't fix. Later that night, after dinner, she didn't talk much. She seemed distracted. I tried to push it aside, telling myself it was just stress, that we'd get through it. But deep down, I knew the truth. We were no longer the team we once were. The days that followed felt like a blur. I tried to keep the house in order, to keep myself busy, but it was hard. Every time I looked at Carla, I felt the distance between us, as if there was an invisible wall she had built around herself. I couldn't tear it down. I couldn't even touch it. She had changed, and I didn't know how to fix it. Then, a week after the phone call, it happened. I came home from another fruitless job interview, my hope dwindling with every passing day. As I walked through the door, I noticed something strange. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, I'd hear her moving around in the kitchen, humming softly to herself, or hear the TV in the background. But today, there was nothing. I called out, but there was no response. Panic began to rise in my chest as I moved through the rooms, looking for her. It wasn't until I reached the bedroom that I found her, standing by the window, staring out into the distance. She didn't even notice me standing there, watching her. She was lost in thought, lost in something I couldn't reach. "Carla," I asked gently. She turned, but it wasn't the same Carla I knew. There was something cold in her eyes, something distant. It felt like I was speaking to a stranger. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice almost robotic, like she had rehearsed it 1,000 times in her head. I felt my heart race. This wasn't going to be a simple conversation. I could tell. I braced myself, knowing that whatever came next, it would change everything. "You've been distant lately," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know things are tough, but I'm doing everything I can to—" She cut me off. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice wavering just slightly. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. You're not the man I married anymore." Her words hit me like a slap to the face. The breath left my chest, and I struggled to hold onto the few pieces of dignity I had left. "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling the sting of tears that I couldn't fight back. She paused, her gaze softening for just a moment. "You're not the man I fell in love with. You're not the provider you used to be. You're broken." I couldn't understand what she was saying. I'd always been the one to take care of things. I had always been the one to provide for us. But now, I was the one in need. I had never felt more helpless in my life. "Carla, please," I whispered. I'm trying to make things work, but I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to fix this." She looked at me with a mix of pity and something else, something I couldn't place. She turned away, walking slowly toward the closet. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her, a sense of dread growing stronger with each step. Then, she said it. "I've met someone else." The words hit me like a freight train. My legs felt weak, and I had to steady myself against the wall. "What?" I stammered, barely able to comprehend what she was saying. "I've been seeing someone," she repeated, her voice matter-of-fact. "Someone who can give me what you can't anymore." My mind raced as the reality of her words sank in. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. She didn't hesitate. "His name is Steve. He's younger. He's ambitious. And he treats me like I'm worth something." The anger inside me boiled over, but I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. How could I even fight this? How could I fight someone who had everything I no longer had? Youth, energy, ambition. The things I used to take pride in were now the things that separated me from the man who had taken my place. I felt like I was drowning, my thoughts spiraling. The weight of betrayal crushed me from all sides. How had I let it get this far? How had I not seen the signs? But the truth was right there in front of me. Carla wasn't the woman I knew. She wasn't the woman who stood by me through thick and thin. She was someone else now, and I was nothing but a shadow in her life. "I don't want to be with you anymore," she said, her voice steady now, as if she had already made her peace with everything. "I'm leaving, and I'm taking what's left of me with me." I stood there, frozen. The love of my life was walking away, leaving me with nothing but empty promises and broken dreams. She grabbed a small suitcase from the closet and started packing. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. What was the point? Everything had already been taken from me, piece by piece. And now, she was the one walking out the door. As she turned to leave, she paused at the doorframe. "I hope you find yourself again," she said, her voice soft but final. "But I can't be the one to help you." And with that, she was gone. I stood there in silence, the weight of her departure sinking in. The room felt emptier than ever before. The house, once full of life and laughter, now felt cold and hollow. But that was just the beginning. The days that followed Carla's departure felt like a never-ending nightmare. I walked around the house like a ghost, everything reminding me of what I had lost. The furniture, the photos on the walls, even the smell of her perfume that lingered in the air. It all felt like a cruel reminder of what had slipped through my fingers. I didn't know where she had gone. I didn't know where Steve was, or if she was truly happy. But I needed answers. I needed to understand why this had happened. I had to know if there was something I could have done differently, something I could have said that might have changed her mind. Maybe it was a mistake, and if I could just find her and apologize, things could go back to the way they were. The problem was, I didn't know where to start. I tried calling her, over and over again, but each time, she sent me straight to voicemail. I texted her, asking if we could talk, but the messages went unanswered. Each ignored attempt felt like another nail in the coffin, another piece of a man I used to be slipping away. Days turned into weeks, and I sank further into despair. I stopped going to job interviews, stopped trying to get my life back on track. I spent my days sitting in front of the TV, drinking away my sorrows. The loneliness ate at me. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was her face, and I wondered how Steve made her feel alive when I couldn't even get a simple reply. But then one evening, something unexpected happened. It was around 10 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the sudden sound jolted me out of my stupor. I stumbled toward the door, wiping away the tears that had begun to well up again, thinking it might be some kind of mistake. When I opened the door, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Carla. She stood there on the doorstep, looking different, more polished than I had ever seen her. Her hair was styled in a way that made her look even younger, and she was wearing a coat that I had never seen before. But the most shocking thing of all was the look in her eyes. It wasn't the loving gaze I had known for years, nor the angry one that had come when she left. No, this time, it was something else. It was guilt. It was remorse. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft but full of uncertainty. I was speechless. What was this? Was this some kind of game? What was she trying to do? I didn't know if I should slam the door in her face or invite her inside to get some kind of closure. But before I could say anything, she stepped forward, pushing the door open with a soft force. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "I shouldn't have left like that. I didn't know what I was doing." I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. My heart was pounding in my chest, my hands trembling. I felt the pull of emotions that I had buried, trying to stay strong, trying to move on. But the sight of her, the woman I had loved for so long, was breaking down every wall I had built to protect myself. "I was wrong," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was angry, and I didn't know how to cope. But I was also scared. Scared that we were drifting apart, scared of what I had become. And I took it out on you." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. How could she say that now, after everything? After she had left me? After I had been broken down day after day, just trying to survive? But something inside me softened. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman I had married, the woman who had shared my hopes and dreams, was still in there somewhere. Maybe this was the chance to fix everything. Maybe we could start over, rebuild, and heal. I took a step back, allowing her to come inside. She closed the door behind her, and we stood there in silence for a few moments, neither of us knowing where to begin. Then, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "I've made a huge mistake. I thought leaving would make me happy, but it didn't. I've been with Steve, and I realized he's not who I need. He never was. He was just a distraction from the pain." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of anger and relief flood through me. Steve, he was the one who had taken her away, the one who had promised her the things I couldn't. But now, hearing her say that, hearing her admit that it had all been a mistake, something in me wanted to reach out, to hold her, to take her back. The possibility of redemption was so close I could taste it. But I began trying to hold on to the pieces of myself that were still intact. "You left me. You walked out without a second thought. What about all the years we spent together? What about everything we built? Carla looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I don't know. I was confused. And I hurt you. And I'm sorry. I wanted to scream, to demand an answer, to force her to feel the pain I had felt when she walked away. But instead, I stayed silent, waiting for her to say something that would make sense of everything. But then, as if out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell that I never expected. "I'm pregnant," she said, her eyes locked onto mine. The world seemed to stop. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, and I couldn't breathe. Pregnant? With who? My mind raced, and my heart pounded in my chest. Was this Steve's child, or was it mine? But before I could say anything, she added, "It's yours." I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. Pregnant. Her words echoed in my mind, over and over again. "It's yours." I couldn't process what she was saying. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Everything became blurry. The house, the furniture, even Carla standing there before me. Was this a dream? Had I gone mad? I looked at her, my mouth dry, my hands shaking. "What do you mean? It's mine?" I choked out. My mind scrambled to make sense of it all, but nothing added up. Carla's face was pale, her eyes distant. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was confused, and I made so many wrong decisions. I was angry with you, but now I see things differently. I made a mess of everything, and Who is it?" I interrupted her, the bitterness creeping into my voice. "Who is the father? Is it Steve? Is that why you left? Is this some kind of game to you?" Her eyes widened at my words, and she quickly shook her head. "No, it's not his. It's yours." My head was spinning. I could barely make sense of her words, let alone accept them. The man who had been left broken, humiliated, and betrayed was now faced with a reality I wasn't prepared for. She was back, but there was a child involved, a child that, somehow, had changed everything. I took a step back, feeling the weight of her words crush down on me. The reality of the situation settled like a brick in my stomach. Was this really happening? Had I spent all this time grieving, only to discover that everything was now tied up in this new truth? "Carla," I started, but the words failed me. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why wait until now to come back?" She closed her eyes, as if the weight of her own choices was too much to bear. "I was scared, John. I thought it was too late. I didn't know if you would ever take me back. And I didn't know how to fix everything I'd broken." I stared at her, the anger, confusion, and sadness swirling in my chest. "You don't get it, do you? You left me. You walked out on me when I needed you the most. And now, after everything, you want me to just accept this? To just accept that you're pregnant with my child and expect everything to go back to normal?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "No, I don't expect it to go back to normal. But I want to make it right. I want to fix what we had, John. I want to try. For the baby. For us." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. How could I even think about forgiving her for what she had done? How could I trust her again after everything that had happened? But then, I looked into her eyes filled with regret, with guilt, with the weight of her own mistakes, and I saw a glimmer of hope. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe she was finally ready to make things right. But there was something else gnawing at me, something deeper than the betrayal and the heartbreak. I had spent so many years of my life with this woman, building a life together. We had been through so much, good and bad, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about our relationship anymore. It was about something more, something bigger. I had to make a decision. I had to decide if I was willing to open my heart to her again, to try and rebuild the life we once shared, despite the wreckage she had left behind. But could I really do it? Could I forgive her? Before I could say anything else, the doorbell rang. I froze. Who could it be? Carla looked just as startled, but before she could react, the door opened, and standing there in the doorway was none other than Steve. My heart sank into my stomach as he walked in without a word, his eyes focused on Carla. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice casual, almost indifferent. I stood there, frozen in place, unable to process what was happening. "Steve." The man who had stolen my wife. The man who had made me feel like nothing. The man who had broken my family. He was standing in my house, like he belonged here. But Carla wasn't looking at Steve. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor, as if she had no place left to stand. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking with anger. Steve glanced at me, his face unreadable. "I came to make sure everything was all right. Carla told me what was going on, and I wanted to help." My blood boiled. Help. After everything he had done to me, after what he had taken away, he wanted to help. Carla spoke up before I could say anything more. "Steve, this isn't what you think. I've been trying to figure things out, and Before she could finish, Steve cut her off, his voice suddenly sharp and cold. "I don't know why you're wasting your time, Carla. It's over. You and I both know it. This is just a mistake." The words stung, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. And as much as I wanted to lash out, to demand that he leave, I knew that this moment was bigger than him. It was bigger than Carla. It was about me. "Get out," I said, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I don't want you here anymore." Steve didn't say a word. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving me alone with the woman who had broken my heart, with the woman who was now carrying my child. The room fell silent, and I was left to face the chaos that had come into my life. But what was I supposed to do now? Where did I go from here? Carla looked at me, her eyes pleading for some kind of forgiveness, but I wasn't sure I could give it to her. Not yet. Not until I could make sense of everything. The weight of the situation was suffocating. The man who had once been on top of the world was now brought to his knees, and there was no telling what would come next. The door had just slammed shut behind Steve, and the silence that followed felt deafening. It was as though the world outside had stopped moving, leaving only me and Carla in this small, suffocating room. She stood there, her eyes still pleading, but I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every second felt like an eternity, and the walls seemed to close in around me. The man I had been just a few months ago, strong, confident, happy, was gone, replaced by a broken shell who was now facing the hardest decision of his life. "John!" Carla's voice was soft, almost apologetic, but it only made me more agitated. The sympathy in her tone grated on my nerves. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I swear, I never wanted to hurt you. I made so many mistakes." Her words fell on deaf ears. I had heard it all before. Excuses, promises, broken vows. It felt like nothing more than empty words now. I took a few steps toward the door, needing some space, needing to breathe. "You left me, Carla. You left me when I needed you the most. And now you're here with some confession? Some twisted revelation that I'm supposed to just accept." I spat the words out, the anger finally bubbling to the surface. She stepped forward, trying to reach me, but I pulled away. "John, please. I'm so sorry. You don't get it, do you?" I interrupted, my voice trembling with frustration. "I'm not the same man anymore. You took everything from me. My dignity, my confidence, my life. And now, after all this time, you want to come back and make it all better." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you this way. I thought maybe we could start over. I thought maybe I could fix what I'd destroyed. For the baby. For us." Her words were laced with desperation, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I couldn't just erase what had happened. I couldn't pretend that the last few months of my life didn't exist. That pain was etched in my bones, a constant reminder of the woman who had once loved me and then walked away when things got hard. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice low. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even want to." She stepped back, her face crumpling as if she was about to break into 1,000 pieces. "I understand. I really do. But John, you have to understand, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life, and I've paid for it every day since. I didn't know how to fix things, and I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I kept my distance, it would get better. But now I realize how wrong I was. I was selfish. I felt my heart soften just a little. Her words, though heartfelt, couldn't change what had been done. They couldn't erase the time we had lost, or the heartache she had caused. But at the same time, I wasn't the same man who had been desperate to keep her in my life. I was different now. I had learned to survive without her. I had learned to live in my own skin again, and that was something I could never let go of. I don't need your pity, Carla, I said firmly. I don't need you to tell me how sorry you are. I don't need your apologies. What I need is a life that doesn't include all this drama. I need peace. I need to rebuild. She looked at me with such longing, but I wasn't sure I could give her what she wanted. I wasn't sure I could ever trust her again. The truth was, I didn't even know who I was anymore without her by my side. But just as I thought I was done, the room grew colder, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. As I was about to say something else, the phone rang, shattering the tension in the room. I didn't want to pick it up. I didn't want to deal with anything else. But Carla was looking at me, her face filled with concern. Maybe it's important, she said softly, and with a resigned sigh, I grabbed the phone off the counter. Hello, I answered, trying to sound as calm as possible, though my heart was racing. There was a long pause on the other end, before a voice I didn't recognize spoke. Is this John Stevens? The voice asked. Yes, who is this? I replied, my anxiety spiking. This is Liam Harper from Harper & Company. I've got some news for you regarding your retirement fund. I froze. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, hoping for. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to focus on the conversation. Mr. Stevens, the man continued, I wanted to inform you that due to your previous employment and recent evaluations, we've decided to offer you an opportunity to reclaim a portion of your lost pension benefits. After reviewing your case, we believe that you qualify for a substantial sum. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all these years of hardship, after losing everything, this unexpected windfall could change my life. It felt like a cruel joke. How could something so good come when it seemed like my world was falling apart? I sat down slowly, the weight of the conversation sinking in. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The money I had lost. The retirement I had sacrificed. The pension I thought was gone forever. But then, I looked at Carla. She was waiting, watching me, hoping for some sign that things could return to how they once were. I didn't know what to feel. The money wasn't what I needed. It wasn't going to fix my marriage. It wasn't going to take away the betrayal, the pain, the feeling of being abandoned. No amount of money could do that. Still, something inside me stirred. Maybe this was my chance to start over. Maybe it was time to make a decision not based on anger or resentment, but on what I really wanted out of life. John, are you still there? The voice on the other end snapped me back to reality. I took a deep breath. Yes, I'm here. Thank you for the information. I'll think about it. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. But what would I do with this new opportunity? Would I take the money and rebuild my life? Or would I walk away from all and start fresh, free from the past? The room was silent again. Carla had been watching me, her eyes full of unspoken questions, but I had no answers to give her. Not yet. There was too much to process, too many emotions to untangle. But I knew one thing. My life was changing, and I was the one who had to decide how it would unfold. The next few days passed in a blur. The windfall from the retirement fund, while a massive relief, did little to bring me peace. It was as though life had given me a gift, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Should I take the money and rebuild, try to repair the life that had crumbled around me? Or should I use it to put an end to everything? Walk away from Carla, from the house, from the life I'd spent so many years trying to create? I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection of a man I no longer recognized. The lines on my face were deeper now, etched with regret and the weight of years lost. I no longer saw the man who had once dreamed of a future with Carla, with a life filled with hope and ambition. Instead, I saw a man burdened by the wreckage of his past, uncertain of where to go next. Carla had left me alone for the day, giving me space to think. It had been a few days since the phone call about the pension, and the silence in the house felt suffocating. It was almost as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a decision. I sat down at the kitchen table, running my hands over the papers in front of me. The pension offer, the letters, the bank statements, all of it seemed so far away from the life I was living. I couldn't focus on the numbers or the promises of financial security. I had spent years chasing after the wrong things: prestige, status, the illusion of success. Now, I just wanted peace. I wanted to feel whole again. Suddenly, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated for a moment before standing up and walking to the door. When I opened it, I was met by a face I hadn't seen in years. It was Steve, the man who had replaced me, the man who had taken everything I once held dear: my job, my family, my place in the world. "John," he said, his voice hesitant, but there was a strange warmth in his eyes. "Can we talk?" I stood there, frozen for a moment. I hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for it. After all the things he'd done, taking my position at work, taking my wife, I didn't know what I was supposed to say. But I stepped aside, allowing him into the house. As much as I hated to admit it, part of me was curious about what he wanted. Was he here to gloat, to remind me of how far I had fallen? Or was he here to try and make amends? "Have a seat," I said, my voice colder than I intended. He sat down at the kitchen table, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with tension. I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye, so I focused on the papers in front of me, pretending to be busy, pretending I didn't care. Finally, Steve broke the silence. "I don't know how to say this, but I owe you an apology." I looked up sharply. "What?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I know I took everything from you. Your job, your life, and Carla. But I never wanted to hurt you, John. I didn't realize what I was doing or how it was going to affect you. And for that, I'm sorry." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected this. For so long, I had built up this image of Steve as the villain in my story, the man who had taken it all from me. But here he was, apologizing, looking genuinely remorseful. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued, his voice quiet. I thought you deserved to hear the truth. I've made my share of mistakes, too. I've hurt people along the way, and I can't change that. But I wanted you to know that it wasn't about you. It was never personal." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him of everything he had taken from me. But another part of me, the part that had been broken and battered over the last few months, understood. He was just another man trying to navigate his own life, just another person making mistakes and trying to find redemption. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had lost his way. We sat in silence for a few moments, each of us processing the conversation in our own way. And then, just as I thought the conversation was over, Steve spoke again. "There's one more thing," he said, his voice soft. "I don't know if you've heard, but Carla's been struggling. She's been trying to reach out to you, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't know what to say to fix things." I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of Carla's name. I hadn't spoken to her much since the night of the argument. We had exchanged a few words, but it felt like we were both just waiting for something to happen, waiting for the other to make a move. "She doesn't want this to end like this, John," Steve continued. "She doesn't want to lose you. She's lost herself, too. She's not perfect, but neither are any of us." I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. They were the truth I had been avoiding, the truth I didn't want to face, the truth that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to fix things. But at what cost? I looked at Steve, searching for something, some sign that this wasn't just a game, some indication that he wasn't here to manipulate me. And in that moment, I saw something in his eyes. It was regret, yes, but there was also something else, a vulnerability that I hadn't expected. "Maybe she's right," I said slowly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we all deserve a second chance." Steve nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I hope you can find peace with it, John. That's all I want for you." As he stood to leave, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm inside me hadn't settled, but it was starting to fade, little by little. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had a choice. A real choice. It was up to me now, to decide if I was going to let the past define me, or if I was going to move forward and reclaim the life that I had almost lost. And just as Steve reached the door, I called out to him, "Thank you." He turned to look at me, his face softening. "You're welcome, John." With that, the door clicked shut, and I was left standing there, alone with my thoughts. A million questions ran through my mind, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the same man who had been abandoned and broken. I was ready for something new. The question was, what would that something be? The following days passed in a haze, but something inside me shifted. The apology from Steve, the conversations with Carla running through my head, it all started to take root in my heart. I had spent so long resisting change, clinging to the idea that my past mistakes defined who I was. But slowly, I began to see that I had been given a chance to rebuild, to grow, and most importantly, to choose a new path for myself. I hadn't spoken to Carla since Steve left, but I knew it was time. The silence between us had been deafening, and I knew we couldn't keep living in this limbo. She was still out there somewhere, lost, waiting for me to take a step forward. The thing is, I didn't even know if she wanted me to take that step, or if she already moved on. But one thing I did know, if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I decided to take a walk to the park where Carla and I used to spend hours together. The memories of our time there haunted me, but it also felt like the right place to confront what had been broken. With each step, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The park was empty, just as it had been in recent months. The benches cold and uninviting. It was the perfect reflection of what I had allowed my life to become, empty and cold. I sat on a bench, staring out at the space where we had once walked hand in hand and waited. I don't know what I was waiting for, perhaps some sign, some miracle. But it wasn't a miracle that arrived. It was Carla. I heard her voice before I saw her, a soft, familiar sound that made my chest tighten. "John." I turned to see her standing there, looking almost like a stranger. Time had done something to her, too. Her hair wasn't as vibrant as it once was, her eyes a little more tired, but she was still the same woman I had fallen in love with. The love was still there, though buried deep under years of misunderstandings and lost moments. "Carla," I said, my voice wavering. I didn't know where to start. She took a deep breath and sat down beside me, looking out at the empty space we had once shared. Neither did I. We sat there for a long time, not speaking, but the silence felt different now, more comfortable, more honest. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of something new or the end of everything, but I knew I had to speak the truth. "I'm sorry," I said, my words heavy with meaning. "I've been so focused on everything I thought I was supposed to be that I forgot about the things that really matter. I lost sight of you, of us, and I'm sorry for that." She turned to face me, her expression softening. "I've been selfish, too. I thought I needed something else, something better. I was so wrapped up in my own world that I didn't see what was happening to us. I lost you before you even walked away." I felt a pang of sorrow, but it wasn't the same ache I had felt before. This was different. This was the start of something new, a chance to truly understand each other again. "Do you think we can fix this?" I asked, not sure if I was asking the question or simply hoping for an answer. Carla hesitated, her gaze drifting to the ground. "I don't know," she said softly, "but I think we owe it to ourselves to try." There was no magic moment, no sudden revelation. Just two people, broken by time and choices, but still clinging to the possibility that love could be enough to rebuild what had been lost. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something stirring inside me. Hope. "I don't have all the answers," I said, my voice firm, "but I'm willing to try, to fix this. If you are." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and in that moment, I saw the woman I had loved, the woman I had lost, and the woman who was willing to take a chance on me again. "I'm willing," she said, her voice trembling with the same vulnerability I was feeling. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. We just sat there, side by side, knowing that this wasn't the end of our story. This was the beginning of something else, a chance to rediscover each other, to forgive the past, and to build a future, even if it wasn't the one we had once imagined. And as I sat there, feeling the weight of everything we had endured, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Life doesn't end when everything falls apart. Sometimes, it's just the beginning. Life is full of challenges, heartbreaks, and moments when it feels like all is lost.
Life is full of challenges, heartbreaks, and moments when it feels like everything is falling apart. But stories like this remind us that it's never too late to rebuild, forgive, and rediscover hope in the most unexpected places. It's not the struggles we face, but how we rise from them that truly defines us. Thank you for watching Stephen True Lifetales. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on a mission to share meaningful stories and hit our first 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to us. Before you go, check out the other videos popping up on your screen right now. Each one is packed with heartfelt moments and unforgettable lessons. We'll see you in the next story.